Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today we're going to look at all my Tolumnia orchids in this video and give you a sort of a summary, 2018 summary of how they have grown and how they have flowered, as well as some of my thoughts on growing Tolumnia orchids based on my experience. And before we go into individual Tolumnia orchids in my collection, I just want to say that Tolumnia is a type of orchid that has been getting more and more attention in recent years, and they're usually obtained at a really reasonable price, and I think that may have to do with the fact that the time for the seeds to become mature plants is a lot shorter than the time required for example, Phalaenopsis orchid to become mature, which takes 2, 3, 4 years, it depends. So I think it's just great news for those of you who like to try out orchids but don't want to spend too much money. I think this is the type of orchid that is very good alternative for you to get started on orchid hobby. I only have 4 Tolumnias in my current collection, and we'll start with the 2 that I have flowered so far. So what you're seeing is the Tolumnia Snow White. So it bloomed at the end of 2017, and then in February 2018, I noticed that it was producing a secondary spike for the very first time. And this is also my very first secondary spike in my Tolumnia experience. So I was very thrilled. I made a video and shared with you, and in about a month or so, the buds opened. For the 2 Tolumnias that have flowered for me are the 3rd and 4th one that I've purchased, and I have 2 other ones I want to share with you in later part of this video. They are the first 2 Tolumnias that I had purchased, and I will share more stories about them and give you more updates about them later. But back to this orchid. So at the time, I was really thrilled that it was producing second flower spike and all the blooms opened. I didn't think that Tolumnia was able to do that, so in a way their spikes have similar properties like the Phalaenopsis orchid spikes. So in September 2018, it was also making another quote-unquote first experience for me, and that was producing 2 flower spikes at the same time, and it's the same orchid, this Snow White Tolumnia. The spike took its sweet time to grow, but once the buds start to form, it was very fast. And so in October, the first flower was about to open, and they pretty much open, both spikes pretty much open flowers around the same time. And my experience with Tolumnia, especially with this one, is that it usually takes only about a month for all buds to become fully open so that they're in full bloom, in other words. And another thing about this orchid is that when it first opened, newer flowers tend to have this yellow color on its skirt area, but then as the flower mature or get older, that yellow color would fade into this pure white skirt, pure white color, hence the name Snow White, I suppose. And here's my other Tolumnia, Red Sun, and back in September it was about to bloom, and this orchid also was giving me a first of another kind. And the first for this one is that it produced the most buds on one single flower spike of all the Tolumnia spikes and blooms that I have had in my collection. This one had 9 buds on its spike. This one also bloomed at the end of 2017, but then it did not bloom again until September 2018. And yes, it took a while for it to rebloom, but this time when it was blooming, it gave me night buds. So I think the rest also did this orchid some good. Similarly, this orchid, once it became in full bloom, it took this orchid about 3 more weeks for all the flowers to completely fade away. So back in November 2018, this is what it looked like. However, I did discover that on its node, it was doing something. It was actually producing secondary spikes. And here I mean multiple. This orchid is now making another first record, and that is all the 4 nodes, it was doing something. So if this flower or this orchid has 2 secondary spikes or more, or even all 4 of them bloomed on its secondary spikes, this would be another first for this orchid. And now let's shift our attention to the 2 other orchids, 2 other Tolumnias I have. These were the 2 that I first purchased, and I had no idea how to take care of them. So these 2 actually suffered quite a bit of root loss, and thus were pretty set back, and that's why I haven't really talked about them all that much, because, well, they have not bloomed just yet. These 2 are both potted in this hybrid semi-hydro approach. So this is back in March 2018. You can see that the newest fan of leaves are much bigger and it's much more plumped, and the roots are growing all over the media and are growing outside of growing through the pot to the outside of the container. And this semi-hydro hybrid approach really works well, because I later learned that their roots actually like to be constantly moist. It doesn't require to be dried out during watering. And in December 2018, the newest fan grew much bigger and was giving me its first ever flower spike under my care. Yay! I typically leave some water at the bottom of the outer cup so that the water can continue to wake up, and it seems to be liking it quite a bit. And yes, it may have a dry day, but it will only be 1 or 2 days, and it seems to be doing just fine. And the kind of fertilizer I give it is basically only quarter strength of fertilizer. And coming up is my 4th orchid, Tolumnia, 4th Tolumnia. And this one, I only really have a photo of it from December 2018, because this one, even though when I first got it, was the biggest one of all of the 2, but it suffered quite a bit of root loss, basically had no roots for quite some time, and that's why a lot of the older leaves in the back, you can see, are much skinnier and kind of dry, even though they weren't completely dead. But it was doing not so well at all that I didn't want to take any photo of it, because there was simply no meaningful update to share. But in December 2018, the newest fan grew much bigger and is more plumped, and the best news ever is that it's finally producing the first flower spike of its own under my care. Yay again. It took this orchid almost a full year from having no roots at all to having roots and producing a good fan, good enough to, or mature enough to produce a flower spike. So this orchid has come a long way. So just to quickly summarize my experience with Tolumnia orchids, at least for my journey with Tolumnia orchids thus far, is that their roots don't necessarily need to be completely dry out between watering, and my Tolumnias, they seem to love constantly moist media and have additional moisture at the bottom. Also, when they bloom, I think the bloom cycle, the length of their bloom time from first flower to last flower is about a month and a half. And it takes about 3 weeks for the blooms to completely open. And once they are done blooming, don't cut off the flower spike just yet, just like Phalaenopsis, unless they're completely dried and dead. Otherwise, they can potentially produce secondary spikes from their nodes. So don't cut them too early. Make sure you wait, because they may surprise you in a very nice way. definitely give this type of orchid a try if you're interested. They're not that expensive and can be very rewarding. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!